Great. So welcome everybody. I hope everyone's having a great first day of Connect 21. It's unfortunate that we're still in this remote virtual world. I really miss that connectiveness that we get when we're co-located together. But the most important thing is that we're all safe and healthy. For those of you who may not know who I am, my name is Jim Sdoia. I'm the Vice President of Product Management here at Lineate. Which means I have the privilege of leading the product management organization that is focused on iterating and evolving the products you know and bringing new solutions and products to all of you. Before I jump into the session, I actually have two announcements, some general announcements around Connect 21. So first, I want to touch base on feature voting. So feature voting is a flagship at Connect. And we're doing things a little bit different in Connect 21 than we have in the years past. So if you go to the homepage of Connect 21, you'll see an option at the bottom in which you can submit a feature request for the various products. And so for today and tomorrow, so day 1 and day 2, you'll be able to submit as many feature requests as you want for your specific products. And then on day 3, which is Thursday, October 21st, Eastern Time, the button that says Submit Feature Request is going to turn into a voting button. So on day 3, you'll click on that button and you'll be able to review all the submitted requests, and you'll have unlimited amount of votes to vote on the capabilities that you want to bring to our attention, which then the product teams will evaluate and determine if it's going to impact our roadmaps to see if there's anything we can add. So what's a little bit different about this year than years in the past is by having feature voting turn on throughout the sessions, you're able to see how those votes acquired and what features were voted the most. And we're still going to do that with you, but we're going to do that after Connect 21, actually in the user group sessions that we host for our various products. So please attend those user group sessions where the product managers and the product development teams will actually review all those submitted features and discuss them in priority order as it pertains to the amount of votes that they got. So that's the first update I have. The next update I have is around the group chat. So we actually have a large group chat that is open to everyone on the Connect 21 platform, which we call the Social Hub. And you can access this group chat by, again, on the home screen of Connect 21. And I believe it's on the top menu and it says Connect Up. And if you click on that option, you'll see an option for Social Hub. And this is a platform where you all can engage with each other and have a variety of discussions, and you can review discussions that your other colleagues are having and contribute to them as you see fit. So those are the general updates I have. And so let's get into the session. So I'm really excited about the conversation that we actually have planned today for you in this session. I'm going to be talking with Adam Smeal from the Cancer Treatment Center of America, so also known as CTCA. So CTCA is a national cancer care and research center who takes a really unique and personalized approach to treating their patients. And if you're able to read up on them, it's a really inspirational story. So with that, what I'd like to do, Adam, is have you introduce yourself, provide any additional information that you want around CTCA, and some of the details about what you're responsible for.
Absolutely. Jim, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So yes, Adam Smeal. I'm AVP Product Engineering and Integration Services at Cancer Treatment Centers of America. And Jimmy did a pretty good job of describing our high-level mission is obviously to create and provide the best cancer care in the industry. And we do that with an integrative model, looking at the patient holistically, and not just the patient, but their caregivers, and just integrate not just the care, but empathy. And so it is definitely a unique look at the patient.
Great, Adam. Helpful context. Now, Adam, before we begin our conversation, I do want to talk to our audience and set some expectations as it pertains to questions. So as Adam and I have this conversation, do not hesitate to ask any questions in the questions features that you have. However, Adam and I will not be addressing questions during our conversation. What we will do is we will do our best to reserve a certain amount of time towards the end of our conversation, which we will then review questions and answer them to our best abilities. However, for any questions that we don't get to, Adam and I will collaborate offline and try to provide responses and post them to all of you after this particular session. So I just wanted to set those expectations. All right, Adam, so let's get into to our conversation. There are 3 topics I want to make sure that we touch on during this session. One topic being around what is somewhat of a theme that we've had earlier today around the ONC and CMS rules, specifically around interoperability. Information blocking. Another topic concerning the proliferation of health tech vendors that we're seeing entering the market and the correlated increase in requests for health data. But let's first focus on this conversation's namesake and discuss what it really means to bring interoperability to the edge. And Adam, if you don't mind, I'm going to provide some context for this initial conversation before I ask you my first question. So in my perspective, I believe healthcare interoperability and healthcare integration is really the lifeline of care coordination across the care continuum. Now, that may seem like a fairly generic statement that is just a talking point, but it's true. And you see that with these really complex clinical workflows and non-clinical workflows related to healthcare being orchestrated by interoperability and integration. Integration helps facilitate digital submission of claims to payers. It allows payers to coordinate with providers. It allows people to manage their health, not their health record, but their health from their smartphone or computer. And when I think about all of those workflows that I just articulated and all of those solutions, the first thing that comes to mind, especially in my line of work, are those innovators and those business users who have dedicated their time to actually develop and bring those solutions to the market and to those end users. And these business users and innovators want better access to this data, right? And they don't want to be held up by, let's say, an integration team's backlog, so to speak. And this has led to a trend within healthcare and health tech called citizen integration. And Adam, as I'm sure you're aware, I think there's varying levels of awareness of what citizen integration is within our industry. And for those who have awareness of citizen integration, I bet you if you ask 3 people, you probably get 3 different responses, probably somewhat related, but unique in their own way. Adam, my first question to you is, how do you articulate the definition of what citizen integration is?
So you're right. So the definition of citizen integration has a plethora of meanings, and I guess it depends on who you ask and where they sit in the continuum of care. So I can go through the different ways we define it. And, first and foremost, citizen integration for us inside the 4 walls of our hospitals is really empowering our business users and our stakeholders to integrate themselves. So when we look at integration and the people requesting integrations from us, from our team, we are centralized, like many healthcare organizations. We do have a centralized integration team. And every request, whether it be for a batch integration in real-time HL7 feed API, usually comes through that team. So it's a centralized team naturally. So when we look at citizen integration from that context and pushing integration to the edge, what we think of is trying to not necessarily decentralize completely the integration team and embed integration resources on these teams, but it's to take that breadth of knowledge that team has about how integrations should work, what some of these monotonous requests are, and push that knowledge out very, very much like a neural network almost, right? So try to take some of that knowledge that we have and that we can share and empower our teams and our business users and power users and super users to either do some of that work themselves and be self-sufficient, or at least come to us with more level of knowledge. We want them to feel empowered. And not only does that create efficiency, but it also it's empowering to see that some people are what you find is more people are willing to do some of that integration themselves. And that's becomes like that nirvana stage, right? Is when you have a team who is your high requester of SFTP interfaces wanting to be in like, you know what, we have an integration engine. We don't have to use these PowerShell scripts anymore. Why don't we learn how to use that integration engine? And now the centralized team becomes more of a governing body, make sure that we have all those things in place. So that's kind of citizen integration within our four walls. But then we take a little bit further out of that into what you're describing, citizen integration with the continuum and transitions of care. So, we CTCA we rely heavily on referrals, right? So citizen integration for us is trying to empower external entities to be able to integrate with us seamlessly, whether that's wanting to schedule that first appointment, whether it is this continuum of care with medical records, whether it's within the patient's device, right? We want them to feel like they have a way of getting to their information, and that the persona can be anything from an office staff member who is trying to either push or pull information from a patient they referred or would like to refer, or like I said, a patient who they're just trying to get their records because they've entered survivorship and they want to get their records over to their facility that for their LTC or hometown provider.
Yeah. No, that's super helpful. I think you did a really great job of articulating how CTCA, views citizen integration, which leads us to, the evolution of how CTCA has been able to push interoperability to the edge. And when I think about what you just explained to me around citizen integration, that seems like a pretty significant culture shift or in a different mindset. I mean, you mentioned that nirvana state. I have to imagine you weren't able to, have this really great vision and say, you know what, we're going to do it. We're going to realize it right now. Right. So how did you know that CTCA was ready to embrace citizen integration? And more specifically, how did you gauge your maturity model and then kind of plot CTCA's pathway to achieve that nirvana state?
I mean, we're very much on that pathway. It's, first of all, the funny part about nirvana is you really rarely know that you're nirvana, right? Like fish doesn't know it's in water. But, the path to get to where we are, and we are not at that nirvana stage, but we're getting there, was first doing that initial assessment, understanding where we sit on that maturity model. And there's a plethora of that resource out there that we use, and we kind of assessed ourselves and did some enlightenment and try to figure out, hey, where do we really sit on this? And it's not just querying the integration team. It's meeting with the business stakeholders about what they know or what they think they know about integration. Do they know where their data is going? Do they know where their data comes from? So it's really assessing all areas and leaving no rock unturned to understand where the enterprise sees themselves in integration. And you can really find yourself somewhere along, I would guess, for us, we were probably on the cusp of that enlightenment stage where people are starting to realize, there's some bottlenecks, there's some friction, we don't have access, the access isn't there, we don't know the processes, to maybe on the borderline of systemic where we're thinking the integration team has defined processes or some defined processes. It's just that the rest of the enterprise doesn't know about those things yet. So that's kind of where we started this journey. And we're part of it, and to be blunt, is technology too. And it is to refer back to the threefold: people, process, technology. For us, it was a little bit of all three. And technology was probably the brunt of that. And so we really had to understand, do we have our footing? Do we have the fundamental pieces here to begin this journey? And if we don't, then we really gotta sit and think, how are we going to get there? So that was probably the step one for us, was evaluating those three pieces. Now we have made some strides in the past year to start to unwind some of the nest. And now we're starting to put some of the pieces into place, all while trying to realize that vision that we do want to push it to the edge. And we do want to make sure that people understand that integration is a product, it's a service line, it's kind of the lifeblood of many healthcare organizations. And that in order to get to this vision where they can be empowered, they have to be part of the journey and not just consumers of the journey.
Adam, what would you define as one of your, I'm sure there were many, but what do you think your biggest hurdle was as you went through those evaluations for those various stakeholders, and as you as you try to achieve the outcomes or the vision that you set for CTCA?
I think, a big challenge is, so I talked a little bit about the decentralization of integration. Like that's ultimately kind of where we want to head, is we want to have some of those practices infused in a lot of the teams. Ironically enough, we started from a decentralized integration mindset, but not in a good way. There's a lot of teams that, and this still happens, and it's no fault of anybody's, but it's just kind of the model that I think a lot of healthcare organizations fall into, is that teams sometimes want to be self-sufficient. And so to get things done, faster and quicker, they just they do things. They have their own processes. Mm-hmm. So the big challenge is realizing that while we want to be decentralized, we kind of came from a place of decentralization. So we have to almost break that mindset and break those silos and start to communicate. One of the big things that we're doing right now, one of the big steps forward, is really creating that catalog, that integration inventory catalog. We start with our own because we got to clean up our own front yard before we can walk over to our neighbors and ask them to clean up their yard. We have to come up with a way, and a pragmatic way of saying, here's everything that we know about. These are all the data feeds. These are all the things that we possibly have, and then communicating that into a framework that says, you tell us what doesn't fit here, or what we don't know about. And that has been a challenge, and that's probably continuously the biggest challenge. Is like there's some dirty laundry everywhere, and that's health. I think that's just kind of a theme in healthcare, is that technical debt.
Sure. Adam, is there a specific example of, so one of the things, especially as a product manager, I love is telling the stories of, the value that I can unlock, or the outcomes that we can drive with our various solutions for our customers. Can you provide a specific example of, a health innovation or an initiative within CTCA that was really powered by this approach of bringing innovation to the edge?
There's been a couple movements. Now, mind you, we're in flight right now of replacing our integration foundation. One of the things that we acknowledged was with COP, which was the conditions of participation with patient notifications. So we recognized, as we started evaluating solutions to meet that, we had all the pieces in place. In different, I should say, we identified the pieces we needed to connect together. So they were there, they just needed to be wired up. And as we were evaluating solutions, we realized that we knew this data very, very intimately. And we realized that it was there to just latch onto, and all we had to do was really just connect the dots. Now, the teams were very much separate teams that worked on this innovation for COP. But this brought up a really good point, and it kind of emphasized the need for citizen integration. We brought in a lot of teams together to deliver our solution for COP and for CMS to meet the mandate, but we didn't need to. In theory, we could have, having met that state of citizen integration and having those things published and showing people the way, we could have had the team that really needed to do the brunt of the work to say, this is the data that I need, this is how I need to get it, and just really rely on some of that more of that governance to make sure they're following best practices to get it and to deliver it. Ultimately, a lot of teams had to collaborate and spend a lot of time in order to deliver that solution. And we did, but again, it's a perfect example of just being able to communicate data and communicate integration as a product and empower users who need to integrate, give them a way to do it themselves.
Got it. Before we move on from this topic, as the audience listens to you and listens to, and hears this journey that CTTA and you have taken, as it pertains to really embracing citizen integration and pushing interoperability to the edge, what is the one takeaway you would want them to have from this conversation or from this particular topic as they're looking to go down this journey themselves or if they're on this journey, but they're in the early stages?
I mean, the biggest one is the takeaway is it is challenging, and it is a cultural shift. But then there's no rushing it, right? You kind of hit the nail on the head. Is there's a lot of parties involved, and there's a lot of integrations that occur in a hospital each day. I mean, we've talked about the numbers that our hospitals is plumbing around. There's no way to just jump from stage enlightenment over to self-empowered citizen integration. You have to go through systemic and bimodal, and you have to work your way through the stages of standardization and making sure all of these things are in place. So I think the biggest takeaway, and again, still being on the journey, is we can't rush it. We have to define every bit and pieces. Otherwise, we get right back to where we started from.
That's great. Adam, if you don't mind, I'd love to move to our next topic around some of the ONC and CMS rules, specifically information blocking. So as I'm sure many of us are aware, on April 5th of this year, the information blocking rules went into effect, which basically says that, they define, let's just give the definition of information blocking, is having the knowledge and intent to interfere with access or exchange and use of electronic health information. There have been many reports, and I said this in some of the earlier sessions I participated in today. There have been many reports that a lot of stakeholders are aware that these rules are coming, or they understand the rules themselves and the dates, but there's some ambiguity of how to interpret those particular rules. And I'm interested in the steps that CTCA took to ensure that your organization actually meets those compliance requirements.
Yeah, so this happens every time. We get the phone call from our compliance team, and we talk about what we think that the rule means, and we talk about what we have in our tech stack to meet said rule. For us, it's a little different. We, as I noted, because we rely heavily on a referral network and hometown providers, and we kind of looked at this in a different light. So specifically around the CMS, the patient notification system. So as we were looking at this, we realized that we have a few different things in flight. We have to meet this we have to push out these notifications, but we're also trying to bolster and create this experience for our referring providers. And we're also trying to realize that, hey, we've seen CMS do this before. They're going to change. It's going to change. It's going to happen. We're going to be sending ADTs now, and we're probably going to have to be sending something else later. So how can we look at this as a holistic model where we put something together where it doesn't matter how things change, but we are not only providing what CMS needs, but we're also providing information to the edge again to push it out there so that it's readily available for whomever or whatever needs it. So we kind of took a holistic approach through it. What we built and why we built it was with that in mind, that there will be changes, and there's more data than just there. We know that ADTs, admits and discharges, are not sufficient in the future. It's going to be more information, and it's going to have to be standardized to some degree. So yeah, we kind of have to future trip on it for a little bit and think, how will this change and what will bring meaning? And let's put something in place where we can easily scale and extend where necessary.
Yeah, that's great. I'd like to stay on this topic a little bit and discuss what it means to be compliant. And where I'm going with this is, I've had many conversations, with many people in healthcare and health tech in different aspects of it. And when we talk about the ONC and CMS final rules, a lot of the conversation revolves around, rushing to compliance, and which is important, I understand, but I also think it falls a little short about what what is the outcome we're actually trying to drive with this compliance? I think a lot of these requirements and these compliance requirements are tools that we put in place in order to actually achieve a better outcome. And I think there needs to be a lot more focus on those success stories and the outcomes that these requirements are actually driving. And I'm curious to hear your perspective on that and how yourself and perhaps others within CTCA view that. Obviously, I'm using the final rules that have recently come out, but we could take this years back even to the meaningful use days. So I'd love to hear your perspective, Adam.
I think there's you definitely put a nice spin on it. So compliance and success criteria are two different things, I think. For us, compliance is what's the numerator, what's the denominator? That's going to give us compliance. We discharge 3 patients, we send 3 discharge notifications out successfully. And we have things in place and tools and metrics, KPIs in place and dashboards in place that show us whether or not we sent 3 for 3 successfully. Success criteria for us is a little different than just, did that number equal 1 when we divided? For us, success criteria is, do we have something in place that will be able to evolve with how we think this is going to change? And it's very difficult to, again, future trip and say, how will this change? Meaningful use 1 and 2 and 3 evolutions. We can only kind of speculate as to what will come next. So we look at, again, patient notifications. We know that's ADT messages. We know that there's much more than ADT messages that are being sent back and forth through all these systems. So what might be a meaningful next thing that CMS might put out? So success criteria for us is coming out of that, we'll call it phase 1 or, deliverable 1 with something that can grow and something that on the flip side, we can obviously measure compliance. We want to be able to do that ongoing and consistently, but also something that can grow and, as we know, will evolve as things change and as we need to add or remove or tweak or anything along the way.
Yeah. Do you ever look at tying this back and I'm not quite sure how you would measure it, but maybe looking at are we actually driving clinical outcomes through some of these compliance measures? Do patients feel that they're truly at the center of their health information, which is a significant theme of these recent final rules, right? So that the patients can have that information in a timely manner electronically and be able to take that as they move from care provider to care provider. Is that something that CTCA or just from your perspective, Adam, is something that we should also evaluate, whether it's through patient surveys or other methods?
I do, and we do. Yes, we do. We do for multiple personas. So we do have a team dedicated to working with these referral networks, many of which we are sending these notifications to, understanding whether they are using that, how that data is valuable. Now, that's also to extend it to some of the other use cases that I mentioned, but it also kind of helps us understand, will this change? Will it not change? On the patient side, again, we do focus groups. We do try to understand what they're needing, what they're asking for, because once they step out of our 4 walls, now while we do have a patient portal, we do have secure messaging, we do have these communication channels. Once they step out of our 4 walls, things definitely change for these patients. Whether they're going to their next upcoming doctor's hometown provider, their next doctor's appointment, and they don't have something they need, or it's they're coming back to us 6 months later, and again, we don't have their latest records because they've been seeing a hometown provider for 6 months. So we do hold those focus groups, and we do take their feedback into consideration, and we constantly are looking ways to do product development and innovation, which is a big cornerstone of my team.
Sure. Before we move on from this topic, I do want to bring it back to an earlier statement that you made, Adam. I think initially when I talked about, how did you ensure you could meet those requirements? I think your words were, we get the call from our compliance team and we talk to them about these requirements. And the reason I bring that up is I think it is so critical for those who are responsible. I mean, obviously, it goes beyond integration, but specifically those who are responsible for health integration and healthcare interoperability to have that tight collaboration with, whether it's a compliance team or other folks within the business to understand what is coming down the pike, what are some of the initiatives that we need to address, so that there's that tight coupling between the I know how to do this and the why, right? And in some of the conversations I've had with various folks, you see that tight integration, but some it's like, well, I don't know about these new requirements. I just get told, right? And so for some that may be in that latter category where there isn't that tight collaboration between those like a compliance team or the business and let's say an integration or an innovation or IT organization, what is some of the advice you would provide them to take some steps to actually make those ties closer and make that collaboration much tighter?
Well, speaking from the experience itself, compliance are not clinicians, and they're not necessarily subject matter experts in terms of clinical workflows, and they're not necessarily subject matter experts in integration. Some of the folks on our side, on our compliance team, they were privy to meaningful use, and they had that experience, and they understand the concepts. But what it really came down to for us was that we need to marry up compliance clinical workflows together and understand how this impacts patient care. And that initial conversation for us was really what kind of sparked the innovation for us. We really started to understand that we can find a good middle ground here where we're not really changing everything for the clinical workflows, and we're still being compliant. And so what I think to do a postmortem and lessons learned on this whole experience was, let's bring those two parties together more often. Compliance is going to know about these things well in advance, and hopefully well in advance. And clinical workflows, and those are clinical teams and our clinical SMEs who are working who know these things in and out, are going to be able to say whether or not there needs to be big process change, right? And I think that was probably one of the biggest light bulbs for us. And again, that's kind of what set the juices flowing. So I think that's probably the biggest word of advice that we would have if we came out of, is get them married up and involved together sooner. And obviously integration needs to be a heavy part of that. But those, that's kind of the trifecta for these things, because they all impact each other, and we all want to be successful, right, and we all want to be compliant. But at the end of the day, we're trying to minimize process management, change control, but also meet those compliance.
No, that's great. So Adam, I'd like to jump to the last topic that we have, which is somewhat related to ONC and CMS requirements. But, again, I'll set some groundwork before I ask you my first question. On that topic of ONC and CMS compliance and the final rules that have been published, there is a motivation there to drive innovation in health tech. And we see this by some of these rules really encouraging innovation by allowing these third-party app developers to gain access to this health data so that they can develop, new solutions to help, patient care, provider efficiency, payers, and other actors within healthcare. And when I think about all these, third-party app developers and this increase in innovation, just to use some metrics that I actually have in front of me, per Deloitte, venture funding for health tech innovators is at $14 billion US dollars, which is almost which doubled this year compared to 2019, and they expect growth to continue unabated throughout 2021. Your organization in CTCA has vast amounts of people's health information, and this health information is very valuable to these health tech or new health tech innovators and app developers. which again enabled them to develop their workflows and their solutions. What I'm seeing is with this proliferation of health tech developers and organizations, we're seeing an increase in requests for that health data. And some health systems have reported that they are just overwhelmed with a growing number of requests to access their health data by tech companies, to the point where some people will actually tell certain app developers, no, we don't want to integrate with you. And then they'll get the request again, and they even forgot that they said no in the first place. Has CTCA seen this increase in requests for health information?
No, 1,000%. Yeah. And I think it goes without saying it that it was around March of last year that we saw a much bigger influx.
What are some of the strategies that your organization has put into place to just to manage the increase in volume of these number of requests?
It's challenging. Because they come from all over the place. So, and as I mentioned, so product engineering is one of my teams. We get a lot of those requests in integration. So we get a lot of those requests for new products, things that we are using, partners of tooling that we are using. We get a lot of those. That's not the challenging part. We can usually manage those and try to understand, does this really fit a strategic initiative? Does this roll up to something that we're trying to tackle as an organization, as an enterprise? And if it does, is it an enabler? Is it a capability? Start to look and unpack that. So to answer your question, that's usually how we go about managing whether it's truly a viable solution that we want to consider or scratch at, or if it's something that's just it's not timely enough at the moment. And we really got to have something strategic in place. The challenging part are the things that don't come through necessarily come through IT or come through my team or come through our other teams. It's the things that come through provider networks and through clinicians and through these other point of care employees. Those are challenging because I won't lie, there is a ton of great tech right now. There is so much good health tech, and it is so good for the patients of the world and us and consumers, and us included, me included. It is great to see what is happening because it's only making the world a better place. The problem is, though, that when it comes through these other channels, it's one of those, this is the coolest thing in the world type of things. But there's so much more to it. To your point, there's patient data, there's PHI, there's PHI compliance, there's HIPAA compliancy, there's what are they going to do? There's GCPA, there's CCPA, GDPR regulations. Like there's all kinds of other things that have to be taken into account. So yes, we've seen it. We've seen a high. So basically, to answer the question, we try to put some channels and some processes in place to get those things and those solutions to funnel through IT or governance or our product team or our innovation team, just so that we can get our eyes and ears on it. And again, start to measure, what does this roll up to? What strategic initiative do we have in flight that this tool helps? Does it enable something that we're trying to do? Does it fast track something that we're trying to do? Then we can start to ask the questions about what's under the hood.
Right. I want to continue this conversation and talk a little bit about some of the concerns that I can envision. And I've read and listened to health systems that they have about these requests, and some of it pertains to concerns that this health information, health data could be used in unintended ways. And I'll give a few examples that I've heard actually multiple times. One is that data could be cross-referenced against other data to identify individuals that may be of higher risk of diseases, and then they raise their health premiums. Or there's some challenges from a monetization standpoint. And then perhaps some of these health tech, there's concern that some of these health innovators could use that information to target advertising towards individuals. And there's this almost like ethical dilemma, right? of those who are opening up this information of the use of data and versus like monetization. And if you discover that this is happening, should you notify those providers that are perhaps using those systems or those particular patients? And all valid concerns. What I'm interested in, actually, let me add to that. It gets to a point where some of the providers of information feel like they're actually part of the product that's being sold. And so do you share those concerns? And what are some of the practices that you have put in place to actually vet the individuals that are requesting access to this information?
So I use the age-old story of the retailer who knew a woman was pregnant before her parents knew that she was pregnant due to just habitual things and buying habits and browsing habits. And that's very much where healthcare is heading. So yeah, see what you have depicted is very true, and it's a very real thing, and it's a big concern for our organization as well. So some of the things that we start to ask is data sharing, multi-tenancy. What if we're, let's use a AI platform that's, listening into our telehealth calls, and starting to digest that information to print out documentation or something. We're looking at that and asking the questions, well, how are you training this model? How is there other health institutions data training the model, or is it ours? Are we training this data model for other institutions? We really got to we got kind of nitpick the technology. We really have to get close and down and dirty to what is this? And that means things like being up and keen on how these things work and how this technology works, what is under the hood. And if we were to build it ourselves, how would we build it? We have to be close to what's happening in the industry, and not just in healthcare. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that we've kind of come up with in the past year and a half as these tech vendors have been coming up, is that other industries are doing this kind of stuff. We got to learn from them. We have to learn how they got to where they are, because if we don't understand their history, and it's no surprise to anybody that healthcare is always lagging behind many of the other industries. But if we can learn how these other industries got to where they are, maybe we can stop ourselves from making some of the same mistakes and be a little bit more protective of information and treat our patients' data like truly patients' data and not customer data.
I love that you brought up learning from others. Why reinvent the wheel if there's prior art that we can look at? And when you think about other industries, the first thing that comes to my mind is the financial world and fintech, heavy regulated, very sensitive information, and we are seeing these introduction of players like Mint and others that are tapping into our bank accounts via APIs and what have you. So have you reached out? I'm curious, what industries would you look at? Like, would it be something like a finance or fintech? And have you engaged those industries yourself to understand some of their better practices, or is this something that you see CTCA doing in the future?
Yeah, we have upcoming sessions with other entities and other industries. Retail is a big one, because retail is really good. I mean, obviously Amazon is listening to this talk right now, so it can present things to me. So the other retail is a very good one. Finance is one of those ones that it's interesting, because finance is like just ahead of the curve on us, right? It's a joke because they kind of do lag, but they also are starting to adopt some newer technologies. Fintech has excelled greatly in the past couple of years. So fintech is another one, just because of how parallel we have been. And hospitality is interestingly one that we started broaching. So hospitality, just simply because, as I noted, we are very empathetic. Healthcare needs to be very empathetic, and not just at a patient level, like high touch, but empathetic at patient information and patient data. So just trying to learn from those other industries and how these other industries are protecting their information, and how did they get to where they were, and those are definitely conversations we're having.
Oh, that's great. Adam, those are all the items that I had ready for you. I hope you did as I did. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope all of you who are watching enjoyed the conversation that we had with Adam about bringing interoperability to the edge. So we do have 15 minutes until our next session. Just as a reminder, our next session is around cybersecurity updates, where we're going to be having a conversation with Sensado. That starts at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So I do want to give folks some time to, in between sessions, to grab a coffee, grab a water before the next one. But we do have some time to take some questions, if there are any. And I encourage, if you haven't and you do have a question, please submit it. But Adam, I don't know if you can tell. I don't know if I see any questions at this time. Do you?
I think I see one. I don't know if that was meant for this session. How do you control your data stewardship?
Do you want to take that one?
I can, and not to punt on it, but I will. I'll talk to it briefly, because similarly to our integration maturity assessment that we went through, our data warehouse and BI teams are going through the same exact thing as we speak. And it's not that it happened in a parallel effort, because in a perfect world it would have, because what we're realizing is that the outcome of that assessment is very much impedant on what we do and how we do our things and how we push integration to the edge and we reach that self-service zone. So data stewardship really is an outcome of that. And it's a topic and a hot point that we've been realizing is without full-blown MDM, data stewardship, and data governance, we're going to be in a place where we can't really push new APIs out the door. We can't really get to that citizen integration because we don't know exactly where the state of truth is and where and that we're pulling the correct content. And that's critical path. Isn't data sharing with external entities just a logical extension of citizen integration? So I think you could probably, you could put it in that box, but when we think of citizen integration, we're not necessarily talking about opening our EHR up to anybody. Citizen integration is for us as an entity that wants to start scheduling appointments for us, to us, or wanting to, an approved doctor's office who wants to do data sharing with their patient records, that we have a similar patient in mind. So you could say that citizen integration goes as far as publishing APIs for de-identified data, that we put those out there, but I don't think that necessarily that's our trajectory. I don't think we want to put APIs or integrations out there that can be used negatively. And so that comes with governance, and that comes with a lot of things in place.
So Adam, I'm going to need to rely on you, my friend, to see
fine.
if there's any questions. I think my screen froze, and I don't want to touch anything because I don't want to lose connection.
Oh, but, that's all good. I can read them off. So we have another one. Cancer is a specialty. Do you feel like patients really want intimate control of their everyday healthcare data? I cannot emphasize yes, 1,000% they do. Our focus groups with our patients, and given even and across a multitude of demographics that we have these focus groups with, patients want their data, and they want it at the palm of their hands, and they want it soon. Sometimes, and I will say that we do things slightly differently. So we do have a homegrown patient portal, and one of the gripes comes from internally, that we give patients more information than other patient portals do. We give them access to labs a little bit sooner than other patient portals do, because that has been the ask from our patients. They want those lab results faster. They want to be able to see them. And that, when I say there has been ruffles within, is that sometimes those patients get their information quicker than their providers do, which, is good and bad. But yes, I fully believe patients want their data, and they want control of it.
Adam, are there any other questions?
That was it.
No? All right. Well, we're at 10 to the hour before our next session, so I think this is a good place to wrap up. Just to iterate, in 10 minutes we will have cybersecurity update where again Lenny will have a conversation with Sensado. So please make sure again you refresh so you can attend that session. Adam, I cannot thank you enough for participating in this conversation. I think it's incredible, but what you all are doing at CTCA, and I look forward to hearing more about it in the future.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one.
Take care.